right around 3.
Man, John, that's right on time. That's impressive.
He's had a few years practice.
And no Steve, we have Wendy online, no Steve, right?
Steve's both of them are on.
Oh, they are on. Okay, welcome to our work meeting for February 8th. I'm gonna get right into this, review of this evening's agenda. And I was gonna ask. No, I think we're okay, the 2 items that. Everyone? Any comments or questions?
Mine, I have one,
Okay.
on the animal shelter, on the consent agenda, it has the fiscal impact, it lists the full build-out costs, et cetera. I'm okay with the lease being on there, but we won't have any, don't wanna make any commitments to the build-out costs, it needs to be a full discussion with the council. So, on the way I'm reading it, I don't think it would be a commitment, but it's, so I just wanna make sure that that's the case.
So as long as the consent is just the lease agreement, you're okay with the stated consent? Otherwise you need to follow it.
I think that's all that's
Otherwise
on
you
there,
need
is
to,
approval of the lease contract for Harriman Animal Service Scenic Property
but
Management.
you wanna have that full conversation later.
About the build out.
We will bring that back, that has to come back.
We're working on some estimates on that still, but that would obviously have to go through a full RFP process.
It would have been too early to know.
Well, even just budgetary decisions,
Yeah.
like, we have to have that discussion of what can we realistically put towards it. Is it gonna be all at once, should it be phased over this time, I mean, it's temporary or permanent. If whatever money we put towards it, then what capital projects get bumped and which one others get bumped below them, et cetera.
We had talked about that in a different conversation.
So we need secured space for sure, but
Okay, I agree. Okay. We can make a note of that maybe when we get to the consent agenda. Anything else from staff or council? Is there anybody coming tonight, recognitions tonight? Okay. Okay. Future agenda items, anything from council or staff on future agenda items?
We have one we want to talk about. We're anticipating an amendment for the Wasatch South Hills NDA coming in. And we want to know, it's gonna amend the land use plan. So does the council want us to set up work groups like we've done in the past for that, or do it at a meeting with everyone?
depends on what they're asking for, I guess, how complicated it is.
It's pretty complicated. They're adding 120 acres. Is it that much? Adding acreage. Can't remember how many of Staker property into theirs. And that includes our water tank area. And we're changing some densities around, moving some densities around, with renumbering some parcels. So it's a little detailed. It's all land use.
If we're gonna continue to have the committees, then that would seem to qualify for it.
I agree.
When we get that application, we'll
Establish those
have a discussion.
I think the first thing is bring it to all the council and they can vote on who's gonna be on the committee.
We'll give you an overarching view of it and figure out what needs to be, so I don't know if there's gonna be a finance.
If we would need all those subcommittees or whatever like we did before.
I don't know exactly all the details yet, all I've seen is a preliminary land use plan.
So I'd rather do formalized committees than impromptu outside of.
Absolutely. Okay, 1.3, council discussion of future citizen recognition. Wendy, sorry?
I have one more thing, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place, Nathan, but as far as ICSC,
Oh,
we need
yeah.
to know if council wants to participate this year.
I don't know, there's been a real need for us to be there. Is there?
I think this year is gonna be a little bit different. Our retail recruiter, is offering us some dedicated space for appointments, so it's a little different than it's been in the past. But it's up to you guys if you wanna attend again or not.
I think it might be viable for some members, of staff and the mayor, council, I'm not sure. I mean, we do have some property coming up, potentially with the new venture of leasabilities and space. And if we can help them out, the recruiter, but, I mean, it's definitely gotta be agenda-based and
Steve?
I don't think that was Steve, maybe.
No?
Okay, can you hear us, Steve? I don't think he can hear us.
Doesn't sound.
I can hear you, so
You can hear us.
Yeah.
And I brought this up,
Having gone to it before, I don't know that we need a huge delegation, we need to have
Yeah.
an agenda, we need to work with
right,
the consultant ahead of time. And it does help to have one or two elected people there, so if the mayor can go and we nominate the other council members to go with them, I don't think we need more than
correct.
Agreed,
That's what
yeah.
the plan was for, 2 staff, 2 council. Steve has expressed interest in wanting to go.
Sherry had expressed an interest too. So
I'm able to go, so we can talk. But like I said, I think that
the dates are May 21st through the 23rd, just so you can think about that as far as your calendars are concerned. We do have the retail recruiter coming to the city on February 24th at 10 a.m. So we can strategize a little bit better when they get here and talk about how things are going to go in the agenda and those types of things at that time. You'd be happy to have you all join us for that meeting if you're interested as well.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
yeah, cause talking to Sandra yesterday, it's basically you're in,
We can work with
Yep.
that recruiter and have a game plan ahead of time.
you're in Sunday
Those
night,
people-
all day booked out, Monday and Tuesday, and then back home Tuesday night.
We haven't really met with him to talk about things, so.
Strategy.
That'd be a great idea. Yes, Wendy?
Okay.
And Steve is your concerns.
Let him find that out. Okay. 1.3, council discussion of future citizen recognitions.
I don't have anything right now.
I had a unique one that I wanted to do, cause I know we do a lot of sports, a lot of the high schools. Sarah Navarre,
Yeah, she's amazing.
she's a local resident, she was just recognized, like, she was invited to do, she does like gowns and like,
Amanda Russ, yeah.
but she was recognized on, and I don't understand this, but like on the big stage, one of the big modeling something fashion shows in New York, like she was highlighted as one of her, like her.
She does the flying dresses of Utah or whatever.
Yeah, so it'd be, I thought she was like, so anyways, so I'd like to, like I said, different, something different outside the box, so. I can reach out to Sarah if we need to.
I have a potential one, but I wanna talk
Okay.
to some people before.
Okay. Okay. Okay, nothing else, we'll move on to 2.1, discussion and consideration of lease contracts. Cody?
Thanks, Mayor. Information in your packet, obviously, we've been discussing a need to find some sheltering space for animal services. The current agreement that we have with South Jordan has expired. And they have indicated to us that they need to recapture the space that we've been using for their own internal needs, so presented several options to the council as far as how we can move forward in identifying a space for sheltering of animals. It's obviously, there are some short-term needs and some longer-term needs that are being considered. What's in the packet as our recommendation for you tonight is to take advantage of a lease option in the Rockwell Landing Business Park, which has been reviewed by our legal team with a lease contract that's included in the consent agenda as well. But there are other alternatives to consider, so we're looking for some direction as far as which way you would like us to move in the short term, and then include that as part of a longer term discussion.
My only question is the length of the lease. I've heard 5 years with a 2-year extension, or 7 years with a 2-year extension.
So the lease term right now goes to 2030, so it's 7 years with a potential of two 2-year extensions. So a total of 11 years if we were to exercise both extension options.
But there are off ramps at 7 years. Is that our
The
option?
original
now?
term is 7 years, which would provide us an off-ramp at that time.
Nothing before that? Is that what
Uh,
they're asking for?
That was kind of a discussion between us and the landlord. Obviously, it provides the landlord with some stability in the short term. For us, given that we have never sheltered animals, there's a need for us to possibly gather some data. If we're looking down the road in terms of a long-term permanent facility, to have 3 to 5 years worth of data as far as what our actual sheltering needs are would be beneficial in the planning process for that facility. And then obviously, if we were to construct a permanent facility, there's a 2-year construction timeline associated with that. So as we were evaluating the data that we would need in order to put into the planning phase of that project and then the actual construction of it, the 7-year term seemed to fit logically.
So I would say right now, our animal shelter is in our capital plan. It's on the outside of 2026 was when we would start looking at that, so that is 4 years down the path when we put this in, so.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to the length. It seems a little long, like usually typical 3 to 5 year lease, but we don't move very fast as government, and funding and getting that runway enough to get our permanent shelter, or that may be a permanent place for another 10 years. Especially if we put a lot of TI into it, or we do basic TI and move out of it. So I'm not opposed to the length of the contract.
7 seems a bit long to me. I mean, 5 would make more sense for the reasons you just talked about. Financing options, some of our discussions, I mean, coming out on the others, assuming there's more pain economically this next year or two, there'll be some good opportunities coming out on the other side. I'd hate to be locked into something too long, longer it needs to be, 5 years with 2-year extensions. I mean, that's still 9 years, but I think we need to be able to take advantage of opportunities that may come.
Do you think the landlord's open to shorter terms, or is that kind of, or are they gonna want
I
more
think
money?
they would be. I think that might change the terms, but again, they're just looking for a tenant, obviously, right? The longer that space goes unfilled, they're losing money. So I'm sure they would be interested in having the conversation. Like I said, in our initial discussions with them, assuming that we were using 4 years worth of data and good planning with our CIP to plan for our permanent facility, and then the construction of that 2 years-ish, depending on the needs and the location of that facility in the future. The 7-year mark seemed to be the sweet spot between us and them, but I'm sure they're open to having that discussion.
Nathan, you say it's on the project list for the capital list for 2026. If we did this, could this push out that on the capital project?
Yeah, I mean,
Then we can move things up, cause this isn't crazy expense. I mean, it's not cheap, but might be more.
Well, and that's the thing, is it depends on how temporary we make it, right?
Right.
Is it temporary with the eye to doing something permanent? And then the improvements you make to that are based on moving some of those to the permanent facility. But you have to plan the permanent one before you buy some of those things along the way.
Right.
Well, a lot of
Track
those can be
my-
modular, right?
Well, that's the thing, but if the temporary becomes more than temporary, if it stretches too long, what happens with every single one of these projects is by the time you build the new one, you want all new stuff anyway. I mean, buy it with the intent of being modular, but no, now the plan has changed and it doesn't really fit what we're doing now. And we're just into it more and more and more. If it's temporary, let's make it temporary and get a real plan for the permanent one going. 'Cause that's the other thing I'm afraid of with something that's temporary. You put so much into it, then you kind of get stuck in, well, we can just keep doing that and then put those dollars to something else. There's a lot of other capital project needs. These things have a tendency of, if you don't have a real short-term plan to keep it short-term, they turn into much long-term.
What if we planned it the other way, made this a permanent solution for the next 10, 15 years, and went out to get lease contracts with the other 2 cities that can utilize it, that have shown interest? And then we build it out as a.
It's hard to know right now.
Well, true,
right?
right.
That's what I'm saying is,
But we went into a temporary situation with South Jordan and that lasted 3 years.
I guess because I know we need the facility, right? I think we're supportive of being there. But like, what if we do a public safety building in 5 years? What if we do decide to have that out of the ground in 5 years? Then are we paying for space for 2 more years that we're, that, I think that's
So,
a little bit.
But animal control and public safety aren't necessarily together.
But that's what I'm saying, but was there a plan of putting that? That's what I'm kind of asking.
That's what we have to figure out, is we don't know anymore, right?
So the plan shows the animal shelter always as a separate building.
Okay.
It's not part of
So
the
it could
public
be a
safety.
permanent, because it's not, if we do
It's like a
partner,
great location for the other cities to
so if we do
access and
partner with
partner.
Riverton and Bluffdale, it's actually a
But if
perfect.
it's permanent, we don't wanna rent something permanently.
Why not?
We wanna,
We want another capital asset? I mean, I don't know where you break even on that.
just like buying a house,
Yeah, but
especially for a public facility that will be operated in perpetuity.
Well, I guess
I have a
maybe,
few questions,
go Steve.
if I might. I'd like to know, what is the current size of the South Jordan facility that we've been partnering in? Secondly, how much is our contract with South Jordan for that space?
So it's about 5,800 square feet that they have right now. And we don't contract a dollar amount with them per month. We contract based on the animals we shelter there. On average, yearly, it's about 22,000. I think we're right around $46,000 for the 3 years we've been there, as Teddy pointed out.
So-
They are in the process, Counselor, of increasing their size. And I don't have the details to that, but they, not only they're out of space, as is everybody right now, they're having to plan, how to extend that and whether it's a different site or there in some fashion.
So they could possibly enter into a release from us for space.
What I'm learning in the shelter world, there is a lot of, Jared, you probably know this, there's a lot of moving animals around to other facilities as space becomes available. If you've watched the news recently, bunnies are a new category of pet that are being turned in because they attack the owners. Typically, they're prey animals and they want to cuddle with them and it ends up chewing faces and things off. So they end up in shelters quite a bit and it has become a category of sheltered animals. So it's typically dogs and cats, right? And then you have reptiles.
You need to like publicize that, get it on social media and cancel Easter.
Easter. Well, Easter we have with ducks too. We've had ducks before, and chickens. So, did that answer your question, Counselor Shields?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out what our kind of cost per square foot of space we're spending right now. I mean, if we're only using half that space right now, and that would be at best case, we're using half of their space. Is 6,000 square feet overbuilding, under? I guess I'm just not sure that size of space and that size of lease is the appropriate decision. I just don't have any data to support that.
So, if I
It
might,
seems like
Counselor,
right now I want to say we're
It's too
using
much,
350
but that's what-
square feet
it's
right
big.
now. Even if we triple that space or quadruple that space, we're only using 25% of the 6,000 square feet. I guess I'm just not understanding why we need 6,000 square feet and why that's the appropriate size.
if I might, because that's their smallest unit they rent, is 60 by 100.
There's no other space.
And there isn't any other, appropriate space that we can find within Harriman city limits.
Well, I guess I would just say I'm not opposed to leasing the space, but I'm not sure that how much is build out does $600,000 cover? Is that building out the entire thing to be used solely for animal services? Will there be? Could we potentially have a substation there with offices for officers to work down on that end with all the growth that's going to be happening? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how we can maximize the utility of this space for the amount of money that we're going to be investing.
But Steve, I think you probably couldn't hear us at the beginning. Today, we're just doing the lease like that 600,000 is gonna come back to us. That's gonna be in the future to budget how much to spend out there and what level, like whether we phase it out more, so. That 600,000 is not set right now. So,
I understand, but what's the point of signing a lease for 7 years on a space if we don't know what we're gonna do with it? We're gonna just commit and then figure it out later?
So we,
Look, I understand there's a window of opportunity, and I understand there's a limited number of spaces that exist in our city limits where we could even conceivably do this. So sometimes, it's kind of like, there's not a plethora of options for us. I get that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, I guess, suggest that there could be some prudence in how we're making this decision.
And those have been considered, Councilman, as part of our discussions, and it is our intent to figure out how to best to maximize that square footage, even talking about things like overflow evidence storage, et cetera, in that type of a structure. I don't think that there's a realistic expectation that all 6,000 square feet would be for animal services, but a lot of that would be dependent on to what extent the council decides to budget for the tenant improvements or in phases, et cetera. But there are definitely other uses that we would plan on incorporating into this if we were to move forward for the longer term. It wouldn't be 6,000 square feet dedicated solely to animal services. We would try to capture that square footage for other uses.
well, and I think Riverton, if we can get Riverton and Bluffdale,
I was
sounds
gonna
like
say,
there's.
those two cities have a need as well,
interest.
and that could really help with it. But Steve, I totally agree with you, and there's a lot to talk about, but the reality, at least for me, is South Jordan has been very good to us, and let us overstay our welcome by a long ways, and they've given us basically another 6 months leeway to kind of figure it out, so we know we have to find a place. There really just aren't many spaces, so we need to secure a location and then, kind of figure the rest of it out. But for me, I'd rather see a shorter lease because, to your point, we're committing to it for a number of years. To me, I don't know if you heard the beginning, but to me, it needs to be a temporary solution. And whether it's us, Riverton, Bluffdale, and we use most of it, it's all animal, or there's other things that we can put towards it. But we do need to secure a space and make the plan. We can make the plan, but then we may not have a space to go to in June, and then we're in real trouble.
Yeah, completely understood. And actually, Cody's comments about they have discussed and have intentions to fully utilize the square footage appropriately for, if not animal services, other reasons. I appreciate that comment. That's really what I was getting at. Are we fully considering how we can use it? And I appreciate that understanding, details to follow.
And the modular concept of what we're looking at allows us to scale that up and down depending on what our needs are. And that kind of goes back to, we really don't have great data on what our sheltering needs are because we haven't been sheltering for the 3 years that we've been in operations. And so building this modular concept would allow us to anticipate or to better understand what our sheltering needs are. And then if we do end up in some sort of a cost sharing or a resources sharing agreement with our neighbors, that allows us to scale that up. And if we find that our sheltering spaces out there need to be expanded, then we build another modular piece to that to expand that as well. We start small and build it up as we discover what our true sheltering needs are, whether that be just our own or in partnership with our neighbors. The modular concept will help us, especially as we look towards the planning of a future permanent facility. But in a long answer to a short question, Councilman, it is absolutely our intent to maximize every single square foot of that space.
So, tell me if we can do it this way then, cause I think we're all on the same page. Is there a way to structure this to say, go negotiate the lease, right? See if we can come down to 5. But if there's a certain increase,
so you want us to try and get 5 years with
But if-
some extension?
With the 2-year
yeah,
option.
but if
5 years
there's,
with
but
the
if
two,
there's a
that's not- that's
significant
9 years.
increase, then that's,
Would they have to take that off of consent to make that motion, Todd, part of the motion, to change the terms since it's written in the contract?
I'm looking at the resolution. Let me pull that up.
is that, cause I don't wanna
We want you to negotiate.
I don't wanna lose the space, but I'm just trying to.
I anticipated that there might need to be some final terms. And so in the resolution, I put the city hereby authorizes the city manager to negotiate the final terms of the agreement and execute the same.
So
Are you comfortable?
5 years you'd prefer, is there a range on if they say, well, we're gonna, I don't know how that will affect the,
If they're gonna go up 10%, I don't know, I mean, that's.
Well, that's up to them, then they may not rent the space. Right, we can, the thing is, we can look at other options, we do have time to look at other options, it's not like we have to. Again, this is
we have any other
negotiation.
And that's the benefit of lease terms, right? Like with any contract, so for the 7 years, their maximum increase amount is 3% on the lease or on the rent and 5% on the CAM. They're locked into those terms. If we shorten the term, then after the 5 years, then we could be looking at more than 3% if we choose to say that. Those are all things that are negotiated as we do with every contract.
I'm okay with that, because then that pushes us to have a better solution or a more permanent solution in 5 years, even if it's signing on another full-time. I mean, if we decide that's a permanent, then we can sign on for another, then we can.
if we wanna start discussing what terms we want, we probably should do that in a closed session, actually.
Right.
I don't wanna give, I
That's kinda
hate
what I'm
going,
thinking
hate
right
going
now,
and
like,
negotiating when
so
everybody
it's a
knows what we're doing.
negotiation.
So if we wanna do that, well, I would just suggest we talk about that a little later. If you motion to give me authority to negotiate, let's talk about that afterwards.
Good then.
Okay.
Thanks, Cody.
Otherwise, I'll play with all my cards.
You good?
I'm good.
Clear
We were just
mind?
looking for direction, so
Yeah, well,
we're good.
okay, move on to item 2.2, fee waiver policy discussion. Thank you, Cody.
Hi, Mayor and Council, thank you for allowing me to join you from home. I doubt you want me there. You might remember Corona from when we did this previously, the elk that's on the wall here. He joined us during COVID last time and now he's still here. So it's just like I'm going back in time to 2020.
Silent Carrie.
What you have in front of you is a draft fee waiver policy. Nathan, Todd, Kyle, and I have kind of walked through what this might look like and how we might structure this. So tonight is just purely for discussion. I'd like to get your feedback on our draft policy that we've put together and listen to any concerns or recommendations that you might have.
My question off the bat is, what was it before and what's changed that we need?
There wasn't anything before, and that's why we're trying to get some feedback. Staff are
So I guess that,
asked for a lot of fee waivers, and we would like some policy to be able to point to say, I'm sorry, we can't do that.
okay, so that's my question is, I know we've had this, at least prior councils I've been on, we've had this conversation a few times, so what's driving the change?
I think it was last time we talked about the banners.
Well, banners for one about the ups and downs, rentals of parks, who can do that, who can we waive fees for?
So we just need,
other
so we haven't had a firm, no, we don't do those things.
Correct.
And that's the
We're looking for is a written policy adopted by you that we can point to. So instead of recycling this conversation every 2 years, there's at least something in writing. And if the council wants to review it, they can, but then it gives us something
To start with.
when somebody calls and says, hey, I want this waiver, we can say, sorry, we don't do those. Or yes, we do, here's the policy.
For what it's worth, I mean, I've been through this before and you guys can ask questions like where I'm at on this and I don't know, do we still have Steve or did he, is he out? There's a real cost to doing
Yeah, I'm
these.
still there.
There's a real cost to doing these things, right? It's not like it's just free to the city and we can waive it. It costs us real money to do these things, right? Real employees' times, real equipment, real resources. As we've been talking, we don't have extra money to run a charity too. And while they're all good causes and nonprofits and partners, etc., we've got to put our resources where we have to put them, and that there does have to be a line of, yeah, we can do those things of partner, but partner means that you pay the cost. We're not looking to make money on rentals and things, but cover the costs that's associated with it. So I have a hard time with waivers in general, unless it's a city-run thing, cause that, right? But if it's a partner, if it's even Friends of Harriman, like and we're donating city time and resources, there's real cost to that. Like, to me, there really shouldn't be waivers for those things. We say, no, we don't do that, we have to cover the basic costs, so.
Jared, I would agree, absolutely. I think whatever fee we charge, the fee should be intended to cover what our actual costs are, no more, no less, and then we don't waive it. That would be my strong recommendation. This idea that we're gonna subsidize, private groups or other things that wanna hang banners or do things or rent parks, I'm not in favor of that, but I also don't want to make a profit off of that per se. These are public facilities and they should be able to be utilized by the public. But we shouldn't be able to spend city resources for more private type of organizations. I just don't think there should be a fee waiver at all.
So then am I hearing the only change then from what's written is removing, cause right now it says the city and then it says Friends of Harriman. Do we wanna exclude the Friends of Harriman group then? Is that what I'm hearing?
To me, they're gonna be a big user of it, right? And it's,
And I'm fine with it, I'm just making sure that that's,
I think we have, it's just to cover the basic costs associated with it. If we're paying an employee to be here, if we're paying to clean up, we need to cover those costs no matter who it is.
Do we, in our public partnerships,
PPP.
yeah, they're PPP. We have separate contracts and agreements for their use of facilities and fees and all that. So if they were actually a partner of the city or Friends of Harriman was entered into a contract, it would be a different thing, not a waiver. This would be more for like school groups or church groups or outside entities coming in looking for space or looking for bereavement or waivers on the fees. Correct. That's right.
Councilman Hodges, we are working on a memorandum of understanding with the Friends of Harriman group that will come back to this council. You can decide how big or small you want that partnership to be.
Yeah.
To me, that's a real dollar amount, and if we're making a donation to them in dollars already, like, we have to account for this
Offset
as
that
well,
yeah.
right?
But this is for the people that go down to the staff, that go to the information booth and start from there most of the time.
Well, Friends of Harriman's listed in here specifically, called out. I mean, Wendy, can we maybe take that out and maybe address that separately in the MOU and we can negotiate that? I'm not saying I want it,
Sure, we can do that.
but that could be a completely different discussion.
The thing that I want you all to keep into consideration when it comes to them is they're going to do a great service for the city and they're going to actually save a lot on our staff time and resources. So as far as them renting Butterfield Park for the play or things like that, those might be things that you want to consider. They'll be doing all the staff, all the cleanup, everything.
And I think that can be written into whatever agreement we have with them with our donation, right? What that entails. It doesn't need to be in this
And that might be
policy.
cleaner, Wendy, keep that, so they're not viewed as an exception. So let's remove them as an exception and let's deal with that in
They
the
can be
MOU.
in an agreement, right?
Yep.
Is that a better way to do it?
When it talks about the Friends of Harriman, that's just kind of in the preamble section of the policy. The policy starts like at 1.0 and goes on, and all it states is that we can partner with other people.
Okay.
So I'm not too worried about deleting it from it, but it does need to be in the agreement that we have with whatever agency that we're partnering with on what they're allowed to do.
Okay, I see that it's not in the policy
Yep.
itself that would be codified. Okay. That was just an example then.
But we wanna avoid that kind of misunderstanding, right?
Cause right now, this policy sets up a process to waive fees, but I mean, at least two of you said you're not interested in that, so maybe this policy actually has to just talk about their need to cover costs. Is that what I'm?
But also insurance requirements to
Well, I
utilize
mean, the
parks.
policy would be simply that we don't waive fees, but we can enter into an agreement
At the lowest cost
with
possible for the facilities.
partners.
Right.
Cause if that's the goal, is staff wants something official to point to that says we don't do that. We need to have something that says we don't do that, instead of something that says, we usually don't unless, which is kind of what the problem is right now, right?
How does that,
Yeah, let's just give them a punch card, and once they've gotten 9, they get a free one.
but how does that work? Let's take back a circumstance from last holiday season when we had VEC out, right? I'm sure we waived those fees for the facility and time.
We shouldn't, in my opinion.
Or it should come out of a budget.
There's a real cost to that.
True.
We're paying VEC a lot of money.
Yeah.
For their services, right? And we have a facility here that if the fee is the same to them as the same to a Hamilton resident, why would they take precedent over a resident who wants to pay the cost? Right? I mean, I have
they were-
several friends who run nonprofits who constantly are asking me, you know, would the city do this, would the city do that? And I look at them and say, not if you ask me. There's a cost to renting those facilities.
But then I go to some groups that now are friends of Harriman. You've got like the orchestra, or the jazz band, the choir, those sort of things. When they're using rooms or space, right? It's not. A lot of the times, I'm not sure how it's booked out through events and stuff, or if they reserve the rooms, or if they're paying the $50 fee or $100 fee, whatever that is for the minimums.
I think so.
So
That's
that would
the thing
be
is that there's, cause I get feedback from a lot of other people who say it's never available. Like those groups always have it, and if they're not paying for it and other groups can't because it's always there. I mean, again, it's a real cost and
Yeah.
that can be done in an agreement rather than an exception where it looks like we're favoring one group over another.
well, without a policy, for sure, we've been in the past probably favoring.
So I'm not saying we
Yeah.
need to like nickel and dime everybody,
Yeah.
but those things are part of to me, they're part of a bigger agreement where that can be written into it from the beginning.
But I don't even think the $100 fee for the 2-hour minimum covers cost, honestly.
Be a question for Wendy. We had all this broken down. I mean, I guess inflation a
It
couple
really
years ago.
depends, because, we don't, for the bands, for example, the orchestra, those types of things, we don't have staff here with them. They are here on their own. They are using utilities. There may be minimal space costs, but really staff aren't doing a lot for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Say a wedding or even like bingo this morning, right? Or like I know that was a city event, so it's probably a bad example, but say a luncheon for a work group or insurance group or something, where you're setting up, taking down, AV, that kind of stuff. Does that rental fee cover the cost?
They have paid, and I would say the rental fee does cover the cost. However, Monty's sitting there and he can answer this question better than I can. We have had some rambunctious outings in our convention room that have had a lot of fun and
Because it
done
kinda
some
has to happen,
damage, and we have been able to withhold their deposits because of that. It's a public space just like our parks, right? People are gonna people. So
So, most of the rental fees are probably a bit outdated. They were calculated at the time we moved into the building, so we're about 5 years old. Wendy is correct. Recently started withholding deposits because we've had some damage. People come in and have a party, they'll scratch the screen on the podium, they'll mash frosting into the carpet. It takes some extra time to clean up, so, but I think it's probably getting close to time to review those. So,
Another comment I made offline, I guess, is that it has to kind of average out too, right? There's some groups that there's gonna be minimal cleanup, there's others that's gonna be more intensive. So you have to kind of guess it at an average cost. But I understand that the concern about some of those groups, Teddy, to me, those would be folded in underneath Friends of Harriman, right? And a separate agreement.
In the new
with them,
agreement, correct, yes,
right?
yeah.
Kind of takes that into account.
Yeah.
So it's weddings and, like I said, it's the nonprofits, authors group, I mean, things that
Yep.
to come in. We wanna have that there for the community, but there is a real cost to that. I mean, we love the school district, but there's like we talked about a week or two ago, there's a huge cost to putting banners up. It's,
And I might add that we pay to use the school district's property.
Yes.
We pay pretty good.
Very
you,
more
you
important.
said it.
Steve, do you have something?
I think there's a couple of different categories of discussions here, right? I think there are the situation with the banners, which I think we were all in support of everyone having to pay the cost for that. I think there is the occasional one-off infrequent uses of public space. And then I think there are the people that we would contract to use the space on an ongoing, regular basis for rehearsals or those kinds of things. And I think that each one of those types of decisions are a different thing, right? So we might just say we don't want to waive fees for banners, and we don't want to waive fees for occasional, infrequent, single-use kind of things, but we are willing to enter into a discounted price for an ongoing, regular, routine use once we can do an analysis of how much staff time, utilities, that type of thing is done.
Right.
So, for example, like the bands that are rehearsing or the orchestra, yeah, they're going to come in every week, but they don't need any staff. They don't make a mess. They're using power for 2 hours or 3 hours, maybe the bathroom, and then
And
that's
it's a
it.
regular, longer term thing, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the cost to the city, the actual cost might be $5 or $10 every time they're here. So you do that once a week for a year, and you're only talking a couple $100. So I guess I would just say if we classify those as 3 separate categories of fees, I think it might help us come to a better decision.
So it sounds like we'll take another swing at this fee and our policy and we'll bring it back to you. In the meantime, it sounds like we're not gonna waive fees. If they ask, we're just gonna say no. So if you get a call, that's,
That's easy.
Until we get this
That's
in
easy to
place.
point to policy now, because we've never really.
well, we're working on the policy, but right now we'll just say.
Right, I'm just saying, it's been, yeah. I think it puts pressure on us, because we get those calls.
Yeah. But it's like who you know or who you didn't know and.
So it's hard to say we don't have a policy not to, so, okay. Okay. Thank you, Wendy. Okay, 2.3, fleet vehicle purchasing update, Bonnie.
Okay, I'm sure everybody in here is familiar with all of the challenges we've had the last few years. In the staff report, I've included a list of the vehicles that we're working on right now, with the status report of where those vehicles are. Notice in the fiscal year, 2022, that group of vehicles are the vehicles from last year. They're the Super Duty vehicles, the trucks, and they were canceled, and then we were forced to reorder them as 23s. There is one of those that we was able to pick up. Another agency brought a truck in, it met our specs, they canceled it, they found someone who would fill their order. And so we picked that one up at last year's pricing, and it currently is over at the outfitter getting built into a utility truck. One of the upsides to that group is I was visiting with one of the other fleet managers in a neighboring city. They placed their reorder of Super Duties about the same time we did. He's got a couple of VIN numbers that are starting to show for scheduled builds. So I'm hoping, looking optimistically, that those will start showing some VIN numbers here very soon. In the budget year 23, which is this current year we're in, we've got 3 Freightliner chassis. All 3 of those chassis have been completed. One of those is at Vector at their plant right now being built in the hydro excavator. 2 of those chassis are currently over at semi-service waiting for a few hydraulic parts, and they're scheduled to build those tenders hopefully. The majority of the rest of those vehicles are F-150s, and at the time that this report was prepared, since then, we have now picked up 9 more of those F-150s we have in possession, and we're starting to work those through the process of getting wraps and lights and equipment installed. And down at the very bottom, you notice there's a couple of expeditions, those are K9 replacements, and since this report, So we're starting to see some movement in the orders, which is very positive compared to what we've had the last few years. The fiscal year 24, most of those haven't been ordered because we haven't entered that budget year yet. We did move forward on ordering the F-150s, knowing that we'd had such a delay before. And some of those are starting to show build dates too, so I expect to see them by the end of this budget year. At the last council meeting that I was at, we were asked the question of if we'd taken a look at other dealerships and other manufacturers. We had looked at those. We reached out to them again to reconfirm the status of where everybody's at. Nearly every single one of them is experiencing the same exact issues that we're dealing with Ford. Ram mentioned that they're experiencing huge demand right now. They've closed ordering windows early, and they will not guarantee production nor offer price protection. Same thing, similar things that we're dealing with Ford. Chevrolet, GMC, they also shortened all of their ordering windows, been canceling orders, and they've gone to an allocation program very similar to what we talked with Ford. Where we haven't bought Chevrolets, they're looking at their customers that have been patronizing them over the years, and they're pulling their first, so we would kind of be at the bottom of the list. Ford, everybody knows where we're at on that. They've canceled some orders, made us reorder, wouldn't guarantee price protection, and but they have offered some priority to reorders. So if they had the order in the system before it showed it canceled, and then we reordered the same one, they would try to put a priority on it, so those start hitting the front of the line for the builds. We also reached out to a number of the fleet managers that I visit with quite regularly in meetings, and asked them what they were experiencing, not to listen to just dealers, but also get the other end of the conversation. And most of them, I can't repeat what they've said, but they basically are having the exact same problems. One of the agencies uses Chevrolet, Ram, and also Toyota. They haven't been able to get anything ordered. They can't get any order dates, and they're resorting to trying to pull vehicles off the lots. When you do that, you basically give up your government discount. So they're just at the point where they're just saying, hey, give us whatever you've got. I still feel confident that we're getting orders through the dealership that we're dealing with. He understands our pain, and he is doing everything in his power to try to fill them in every way that he can. And on the brighter side, like I said, we're starting to experience some positive improvements on the order schedules. And then also mentioned that their retail side is starting to slow. Higher interest rates and everything are starting to slow down the retail side, which will give more build allocations available for our orders. To kind of give an example of that, the Ford Broncos have been impossible to pick up. Over here at Larry H. Miller, they received 2 of those in that were ordered by private individuals, and both of them have now re-evaluated the interest rates, and they canceled their orders. Now, granted, both those 2 were sold like that quick,
I was gonna say,
But,
it's not available, 'cause I'm-
but you're starting to see some
Stop
people
taking one.
really evaluate, do I want to pay that much money for that vehicle now? So,
6.5, 7%.
So does anybody have any questions?
Does this get us back closer to on track with most of our fleet?
A lot of it, we're starting to get there. The Super Duties from last year's budget are the ones that my biggest concern, because we've got equipment sitting on the ground, we're trying to get those built. The F-150s that we ordered, those are all looking like we're getting them on schedule. And and that was the bulk of this year's replacements, was F-150s. The Freightliner rep that we've been dealing with has been really good about holding slots for us ahead of time. So that's how we were able to acquire those 3 slots and get those trucks already built.
So the majority of the F-150s on the police side for 23, we should have got half of those last year.
Should have
We should have got half of those last year. That were canceled.
No, we actually got 14 of those last year.
Okay.
And then this year, we've got the ones that are on the list.
Okay.
2023s are the ones that would have been ordered in this year regardless. The 2024s are the ones that were advanced from next year's budget because of our concern of the production time. And just keep in mind that particularly on the police side, because we have so many vehicles now that we're cycling in such a short period of time, in about 3 to 4 years, we're gonna have an issue with fleet creep that we're gonna have to figure out with the council how to weather as it comes to future budget discussions.
Yeah, and bunch that group up pretty good, so.
We'll be flying drones by then.
3 or 4 years.
3 to 4 years.
Okay, yep, sounds good, Mark.
Monty,
Yes.
delivery time. Can you speak to any differences, the trailer existing costs with various, providers? Is there any savings going with a different place other than just primarily for it?
I think I heard, a question as far as cost difference between the other providers. So right now, looking at them, they're all very similar. I requested bids from Young Chevrolet, and Young also deals with Ford, Chevy, and Ram. Requested bids from them twice now. They've been very unresponsive, and we haven't got any up-to-date bids from them at this point.
That's where your relationship and partnerships come in from Ford's side.
I think that might be something to look at when the market kind of returns to some form of normalcy.
Yeah.
True.
Negotiate down the road
Right now, yeah.
Kinda locked into existing relationships right now.
Yeah. Some of the other things, so, working with one, particular brand benefits us as a fleet because our mechanics are very familiar with them. They're very familiar with the problems that we have. The diagnostic software that we have right now caters to that group of vehicles. When we start reaching outside of that, we'll have to purchase additional diagnostic software, different things like that can increase the cost and also the number of parts that we're dealing with. So like right now, just for instance, a very simple one. We stock wiper blades. All of our Super Duties and F-150s all carry the same wiper blades. So we buy a case of wiper blades, we're ready to go for a while, whatever truck comes in. If we start changing those up with different manufacturers, that's just one item that shows you'll be carrying additional ones, right?
Yeah,
But not-
Bonnie, I wanted to, I appreciate that very much, and I completely acknowledge that. However, I don't think it's that complicated or that critical of a, request to have some kind of a financial analysis done on this many vehicles that we're gonna be leasing. If we could save $3,000 a vehicle for this many vehicles, that's a crap ton of money. Yeah, there may be some additional expenses and we can analyze that and put that into consideration. But just to say, we're gonna dismiss an entire, kind of vehicle because there may be expenses that we don't know that are kind of spooky, that's just not a good enough answer for me.
No, you might have missed it, Steve. He reached out to him. He's still waiting they've been unresponsive on getting costs back because they don't have
Totally
the
get it.
equipment.
But one of the things Jared talked about was that there's going to be,
True.
maybe this is something we need to put off when they get back to normal operations.
Right.
I completely understand that. We should be conducting a more thorough financial analysis of the impacts of which vehicles we're getting, what the maintenance costs would be, any additional software we need to obtain to service those vehicles, that kind of thing, so that we can understand what the cost of purchase, ownership, and maintenance of these is going to be on the budget of a city. These are huge contracts now. This is not a few vehicles. This is dozens and dozens and dozens of vehicles. We should be looking for cost savings anywhere we can find them. If it's not cost effective to make the change, I can understand that. But if it is cost effective to make the change, we should be considering that. It's something for us to be looking at down the road rather than just picking a specific vehicle type and staying with it forever. Every so often, we need to be reevaluating that.
I agree, and it's not that I have any reservations with any of the vehicles. I personally own a different brand than what we manage here.
Attaboy.
okay? Actually, I own two other brands, my wife's car and my truck are both different brands than Ford, okay? I will tell you, the only reason that I was bringing up those things is there is associated costs that if we start veering outside and we start running a mixed fleet, it does not always solve all the problems that you're talking about solving. But we're definitely open to look at that.
I think it's a fair point, so what we'll do is we'll do that. I think right now we're saying is we're not gonna get bids in time on this, but we can look at what those will be like in,
25, 26 specifically.
in that
Yes,
next
for
budget
sure.
year.
And that can be part of this, part of the strategic plan is we need to look at the entire fleet and other options in, 2 years' time, whatever it is, but, cause it's a big undertaking to calculate all of those things, get accurate bids, calculate,
Well,
this changeover.
Listen, in 3 or 4
we
years,
need-
we're gonna have to order 40 vehicles all at once. We should be talking to people ahead of time saying, look, we're gonna need to replace an entire fleet of vehicles in 4 years. Who's gonna give us the best deal? How are we gonna manage those going forward?
Yeah, I agree, that's kinda what I'm saying, is that we need to put it into the strategic plan to specifically plan on researching this with the budget year in mind.
That is one of the items that we had included as we worked through the strategic planning process, and you raise a really good point, particularly in the police fleet world. We tend to be a little harder on vehicles than our parks department, but that was one of the very first things that Monty actually brought up, that he and I started exploring the second that we started seeing these production chain issues, was to look to other manufacturers and other vendors. The information that we have right now is all speculative, because the answers that we got from all of them were, we just don't know until things get back to normal, right? So we think we're in the ballpark, but we are actively working on an analysis as far as the total impact of the cost of various different brands if we were to make a change. We're just waiting to actually hear back some concrete definitive numbers from the actual manufacturers and not just our anecdotal conversations that we have with peer groups.
Thank you, and I'll look forward to hearing a report on that information after we get it.
Okay. Appreciate your work on this, Monty. I know it's a lot of work, just keeping up on top of vehicles. We appreciate it. Okay, anything else we can do?
Nope, that should cover that.
Appreciate it, Monty. Okay, moving on to 2.4, partnership request for the 2023 Warriors. Wendy.
Hello. Yes, I'm back with the partnership request for the Utah Warriors and the Collegiate Rugby Shield. We did give you a little bit more information than we had previously. And with some of the organizational changes that we've experienced in the city recently, we're working towards a new economic development strategy. And so Nathan and I have been talking about updating the study, which we've talked about for a while now. So that will be coming to you. And I really feel like sports tourism destination and outdoor recreation is something that we really need to focus on in that study. I think we need to prove that we want to be in that space and be ready to accept those opportunities when they come. I've recently been working with Visit Salt Lake and Sport Salt Lake. In fact, I have a meeting with them tomorrow. They are the ones that really advocate for sports tournaments in Utah. They are the ones who advocate for sports at the RAC and for tournaments to come into the state, into Salt Lake Valley. So we are working towards a plan. Are we there yet? No, but we will be. And like we talked about earlier, we've got the retail recruiter coming. We've got the ICSC opportunity coming up, and some different staff looking at ways to really improve how we go about economic development going forward. You have the information there in front of you. I'm here for any questions. The Warriors have been a good partner to us and have given us a lot to be proud of, in my opinion. I feel like their organization is, if not one of the best in Major League Rugby, one of the top teams in Major League Rugby. And we've seen that Major League Rugby continues to grow. And as you all know, it is a big sport here in Utah with Harriman High and Mountain Ridge. So that's my spill. I'm here for any questions, comments, discussion.
comments from council?
If I might before, from the financing standpoint, we've identified we could take this out of the existing economic development budget. We wouldn't need to do a budget amendment. If that's what council wants to do.
Teddy?
I'm gonna comment, I think in the staff report, it said, it used the phrase, plant the flag for Major League Rugby in Harriman. I think that is a great phrase, and I think that's something that we should really be, pushing for. I think with the announcement of the Bees facility up the road, with, soccer facility next door, I think anything we can do to, piggyback on the sports interest that's gonna be coming to this area of the valley serves, our broader interests well. And I think it's something that we should be capitalizing on, so I'm in support of this.
I echo your comments, Steve. I'm sad I didn't make up that plant the flag. I thought it said plant the flag for mayor, but that was my dyslexia kicking in. I definitely think that they have been a great partner. I'm personal friends with one of their guys over there that has been pretty influential in my life, but I think that we have a lot to see from these guys, and the value that we're getting out of the money that we're putting there is tremendous, and I think it'll just grow, especially if we can help assist them in negotiations and getting them a fixed facility here with the new interest of sports and capitalize on that market and capitalize those tax dollars.
I'll just reiterate my previous comments, to go back to what Wendy said about a actual plan. I mean, right now what this is, so devil's advocate, I love sports. If it was soccer, I wouldn't say any of this. No, I'm just kidding. Right, but we have to, right now, this is a donation. It's basically saying we're paying for advertising. I don't know of any city like us that has an advertising budget, right? But if we're looking towards more of it being economic development, tourism, and how we capture those dollars, that has to be the end goal, is to capture those dollars. And right now, that's just not in place. So I'm supportive of this, but I'll just say going forward, for this or other similar things that we're working on, we need to have a cohesive long-term strategy of how it's going to actually monetarily benefit the city. If we're putting money out, we need to get money in. It takes a lot of sales tax generation to provide, to kick just that donation back to the city, right? So things we've talked about with our driving traffic to our commercial centers, hotels, etc., like working with the groups that Wendy mentioned, if we're gonna have more of an economic development twist towards tourism, recreation, capitalizing on that, we need to have those facilities in our city to capture the dollars coming in and out, right? That's my only thing, is we need to have that plan going forward, and then these things will be great. But just being known for recreation and paying through the nose, I don't know any one of my neighbors that wants to sponsor professional teams just cause it's fun, right? So we need to have that plan.
And we are determined to work on that, Councilman Henderson. I've just been doing, and this is by no means a comparison, so take it with a grain of salt. But some of the research that I've been doing just recently, every Jazz game brings in $1 million to Salt Lake City. That's their estimate, right? And again, apples and oranges. I know, I get that. But doing a study like that so we can tell what that impact is to our community would be, is the goal, right?
Well, I know, Wendy, we briefly talked, how do we, we've talked about having to,
How do we get them to
how
spend
do
money
we,
in Harriman instead of
vouchers,
Riverton?
whether it be vouchers, that they ticketing, that go out there advertising to spend money in our city. And so I think that's, even the rugby events, I think we need to have, everybody that walks through that door gets a voucher to our businesses, our local, and everybody I've talked to is like, yes, like we've signed up, like Garage Grow would sign up for 10% off if you go to this rugby event, you get,
Yeah.
and that we can track that too. I think
Back at ticket
restaurants can
sales
help
and
us
stuff,
track
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I think that's being
If
worked
we
on.
have a plan and that's the driver, then those things will happen for sure.
So again, and Jared, I completely agree with what you said, and I think we are early in this, but I think my big thing is if we walk away now, another partner will come in.
I said I'm
And we're-
supportive.
Right,
We
no,
need
I'm saying,
to-
I'm just saying, I agree with what you're saying, but I do, it's, that's where having the conversation earlier is where's this gonna come out of, and that's where economic development, I think that's that's the perfect budget for it to come out of, cause that's where, so, I'm in support as well, so.
If I can make one other comment, a little bit tangential to this topic.
That's a big word, Steve.
I've
Only
talked
if you
about this
can give us
before.
that definition and use it in a sentence.
He did already.
Right. I just use
Oh,
it
no.
in a sentence.
I do have to Google that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I've asked for this before, and maybe with some of the changes in finance, this hasn't been, communicated well or hasn't been vetted out. But I think that as we are looking forward to, let's say, grow in sophistication as a city and start to make more responsible decisions around our budget, I think that these types of decisions should all be accompanied by some kind of a cost-benefit analysis. We should really understand how much we're spending, what we intend to get, what the ROI for that kind of an investment is, how long it'll take to break even, what budget it's going to come out of, all of those kinds of things. I feel like sometimes we just make these decisions in a vacuum. I'm not exactly sure where the money's coming from, how it's going to be accounted for, how we find out what the impacts are, how we analyze any of this. And I'd just like to, going forward, and maybe this is something we need to add as an agenda item or topic of discussion, but I think that we need to have more financial analysis around the decisions we make.
Totally agree.
Steve, I'm not opposed to that either, and I think that anytime you enter into, say, simple business plan or even a one sheet of here's the cost outlay, here's what we expect, and also gives staff direction to, hey, let's pair it with a coupon program, let's pair it with a voucher program or a buy one, get one, or a 10% off the Holiday Inn, or whatever it is, right? That's
Right.
a good plan.
And some of that, here's another big word, some of that is prognostication. But I think that,
It's not to Philadelphia.
I know. But I think there's also something where we should at least be doing some kind of an analysis about it, right?
Yep.
What do we estimate we could get on return for the coupons? How much business do we think we could capture? Something that at least defines that so that we're being more accountable over the budgets that we're authorizing.
Completely agree.
Yeah, and I'm sure other entities and partners have done this before, so getting their data would probably be critical in that. Although it may be the Jazz or the Bees and a different venue, different atmosphere, but we can kind of
Some
baseline it.
starting points,
Yeah.
So I'm completely in support of that. I will say that's probably more than we have staff for right now. So if we want to get to that level, we've talked about the need for some analytical support, some analysts in the city. We do not have that. I have several people who have that skill set, but you ask us to do other things. And so to get to that level, we probably need to discuss how we do that. And that's probably,
Is that an outsourced thing that we can do temporarily? First year,
whether it's
two, or-
outsourced or you bring somebody in who has to learn.
Sounds like a whole
Figure
nother
out.
topic of discussion.
Yes, yeah.
Steve pointed to.
Maybe just add that to a future agenda.
You missed that. That was on 1.1, 1.2.
Remember that for next meeting, Steve.
Yeah.
My mic wasn't working.
Steve, you shouldn't be on a beach
Well,
right now.
maybe some of that will come from this new economic development plan and feasibility study. We may be able to get some of that information through that process.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. So we're okay, we'll move that to that'll be on consent then.
For this meeting?
Is it at 7?
It's not.
Should be, isn't it?
It's not on the.
It's not on the consent.
No, our
Okay.
plan was just to bring
Sorry.
it to you in a future budget
It was the other,
adjustment.
it was the animal, I'm just.
Animal confused. I thought.
I thought it was on there too, but it wasn't.
Okay. Okay. 2.5, legislative update, roundtable.
Let's storm the organize. Make sure they know how the people feel.
Who's leading this up?
I can
Well,
read it.
yeah.
So there's, as there is every year, there's a lot going on at Capitol. I have a couple bills that I'll bring up that I think will be interesting to you. I might not necessarily touch on if you've been attending or watching any LPCs, but just some bills that you might wanna, you might be interested in. The first one's HB 21. It's regarding the Open and Public Meetings Act. This would require all public meetings to have a comment period, which I'm assuming this has something to do with the inland port where they weren't allowing public comment. So this bill is trying to fix that, but it also is broadening the comment period to municipalities. And they try to exclude work sessions and planning commissions, but what about art council meetings and things that technically would fall under the Open and Public Meetings Act? But they're not excluded like they are in the bill, so that might be something that needs to be revised.
What was that number? 121?
21.
21.
Just HB
What about
21.
school districts? Does it
School
fall-
districts would fall in that?
Yep.
I think they're supposed to have public comment already.
Yeah.
HB 136 is something Nathan and I have been talking to the league about. This is the Safe School Routes bill, which would require or allow school districts to provide comments to cities, municipalities, or highway authorities on what they think is a safe school route and have a plan. Which I think wouldn't be a bad thing. The only concern that I think cities have are, one, is this plan gonna be required that the cities do? And two, whether or not they do it, does it create liability if they don't follow that plan? They did try to add something today or yesterday.
Yeah, they added, nothing in this subsection, and it quotes, it requires a municipality or county highway authority to implement a recommendation the committee makes and submits in a child access routing plan. I don't know that that deals with the liability question, but it is a saying that they're not making budgetary decisions for the city by saying, here's our route, and here's what you have to do to fix it. They're allowing us to comment back and not requiring us to do that. It seems like the impetus for this whole issue is a school district up north crossing students across a very busy state highway facility because they're within the 2 miles and not busing. And what we were told is, well, this is to fix that. They want them to bus, but it's not doing that. It's just saying somebody needs to fix and make these routes safe.
This will
So,
make that problem worse, I think.
yeah, I think what it's, as cities, we're gonna have to take a firmer stance sometimes and say, we do not believe that is a safe route. And just flat say that to the district if that's the true case. And just push it back onto this committee that's creating them, that might be the shortest route, but we do not believe it's a safe route.
And what should really happen is the school district should have all the crossing guards and employ them and create their own safe school routes as well as hire their own SROs, so.
Thank you.
So that one,
Make
that
that
one
happen.
makes me a little
That'd be
bit
great.
nervous on the liability side, because if we don't follow that plan, they do have some language that they added that states, there's nothing in this section that requires a municipality to follow the plan. But let's say we don't follow the plan, a child gets injured, and then they get a hold of this plan from the school district saying, we told you it was safer, you ignored it, and now therefore, even though you didn't
There's no
legally
cause
have
and
to follow
effect,
that
yeah.
plan under state code, you were negligent in not doing so. So that's a concern that I have. HB 173 is the government attorney fees. This allows private parties to recover attorney's fees in civil actions against the government. But it doesn't allow governmental entities to recover attorney's fees from people who sue the government. So it's not very fair, and this really doesn't, this gives the upper hand in plaintiffs, people that sue the city, saying, well, we'll just litigate it. And if we win, we get our attorney's fees, but if you win, you just win. So, it's a little concerning. This is, Berkland's bill. So, ULCT is opposed to it. And I think that all of us would be in agreement with that. HB 291 is the short-term rental bill. This one is interesting, so this one defines what a short-term rental is, which I think is a good thing. But then, the only other thing it really does is it allows cities to offer a volunteer program where it legitimizes illegal STUs and gives them amnesty for people that have been running a short-term rental and not doing it in accordance with the code. But if cities allow for this volunteer program to go through, they get a higher transit room tax. Right now it's 1%, I think we talked about it yesterday, and it'd go up to 1.5. And last year we had 10,000 or so.
Between 10 and 12,000.
So, and we don't allow STUs, STRs. But because of how Airbnb and Vrbo is set up, that they remit that 1% to the cities, and so that's how we're able to get rough numbers. And so that's essentially over $1 million people are spending here in Harriman on short-term rentals. So if you do opt into this, you get more of that money, and it has a couple other things. It allows for penalties up to like $1,000 or something like that if you're violating the regulation.
If you're not licensed.
You have to get a business license to do it, but it also.
Do you have to allow it in 80% of your
80% of
residential
the-
districts? So
Yeah,
80% of,
The zones.
it's not clear if it's your districts or of 80% of
Residential
your
zones.
residential
Area
property
zones.
has to be allowed.
So there are a lot of strings attached to the way this is written. My argument would be is if this is what the legislature wants to encourage cities to do this is an optional program, then let cities create that program and not have it be this volunteer thing that you opt in through Utah code.
There was a good news article on that, just from this next weekend. Everything's rented out, right, and people are renting out short-term rentals now, so, KSL did an article.
Regardless of the opt-in or opt-out, is the not well language going away that removes that?
It's not, so there's right now in Utah code, there's a provision that says that you can't use an advertisement like on
Right.
Airbnb as the sole evidence to prosecute a case basically, or to charge a fine for violating the city ordinance. There has been a lot of issues with that because of the way it was worded. But two, then you get the other argument is, well, you can't just use that as evidence at all, which that's not how the language reads or is intended, but we are getting a lot of kickback. So my comment to the league was it would be nice to clarify that we can use that as evidence as long as there's additional evidence. Like we talk to a guest and they say, oh yeah, I'm here on the weekend and I'm renting it from Airbnb or something. So we do need that evidence is nice when you go through that proceeding.
What would the burden to the city to implement something like that? Would it be worth the fees we would get?
Right now,
This is-
no, but
this
with
would be
what we're,
very-
with what we were just talking about,
Yeah.
right? Eventually, yes,
Right.
but right now, no way, right?
It's hard to regulate really anything that that goes on within a residential home as far as renting, and even if you have multiple families living in there against code. Are we gonna park code enforcement out there all day to see how many cars are going and if their license plates match up and whether they're visiting or not? So it is complicated.
To me, it goes back to kind of the home-based business thing. We have zoning for a reason, right? I'm buying a home, I have my property rights are to expect a residential environment, not a commercial environment.
Does it give us
Along with it.
more
That's-
teeth to enforce though? Or
Complicated.
if you had a
If
program?
you get into that voluntary program, I think so, yeah.
The $1,000 per violation fine, that's pretty
That's a big hit.
And the enforcement tool really is, they're not licensed, so now get licensed, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, there's
because-
nothing
because
right,
the- yeah.
there's,
because
And
the
if-
legislation is saying if it passes, it would allow it, so most of
Yeah,
the
and if-
enforcement problem kind of goes away per se. But then now you have short-term rentals in the community, yeah,
well, we still have them now.
yeah, yeah.
It does have a term length on it, which I thought was interesting. It's like till 2026.
Yeah, that's just for the legalization process. We
Yeah.
used to do this in Salt Lake City for illegal units. And it was pretty labor intensive. There were some good outcomes from it because now you're regulating a property that was kind of flying below the radar. So in some ways, you're ensuring that certain standards are being met. But yeah,
Mostly
it
health
was
and safety
pretty,
stuff,
it was pretty laborious.
Another big word, Michael.
Got it.
There's a couple bills that came out today, that I thought you would be interesting. First one's campaign signs. This is a bill that McKell's running. It states that signs have to identify the owner, as with any sign that you post, come earn 10,000 a week from your home, not doing anything, and that's, posted everywhere. It's hard to know who actually posted that sign, even if there's a phone number on there, cause we don't know if that person who has the phone number put that on the sign, so it requires the owner of the sign to put their name on there. There's a $15 per sign penalty and then an option to contest.
With political signs as well, or no?
Yeah, this is campaign signs, yeah, so political signs. I think this is probably not regarding municipalities, but rather highways, state owned.
Okay.
But I thought it was interesting that if you wanna look into it, you can.
What is the bill?
SB 181. There's a SB 166, it's the educational entity bill. This one's a little bit strange. This would only apply to counties right now. But it would regulate micro educational businesses and residential homes and take away land use authority from counties, such as occupancy and parking and traffic and all those sort of things.
Somebody's having an issue somewhere.
Yeah, so this is a very specific bill, but the concern is from a city side is if you allow it in a county under CLEDMA, the County Land Use Management Act, then it'll be a lot easier to filter it in to
Cities,
yeah, the Municipal Land Use Act. So CT's opposed, or their position's pending. I think they'll ultimately end up on the opposed side. Taking away land use authority from the local officials is always concerning. Especially where this is a home business, essentially, where they're running a school out of a home. Why wouldn't we want to regulate parking and traffic and make sure that they, it's not gonna be an impact on the neighbors.
There's a Senator Phil.
Yep. Another Fillmore bill that came out today is SB 174. This is the local land use area. The league has been talking about this one for a while. It just finally hit today. It adds penalties for non-compliance for the moderate income housing plan. The penalties were kind of all over the place as far as what they were looking for. The league did a survey on penalties are bad if you don't comply with your moderate income housing plan, but which would be the easiest to digest if there was a penalty? Because right now, if we don't follow the plan, there is no penalty. So I think Fillmore wanted some sort of teeth to make sure that was happening. The proposal is a $250 a day to the Olin Walker Housing Fund, which would be reinvested into housing.
Wasn't the penalty that we'd lose road funding?
They were talking about road funding.
But right now, it's just this 250.
Yeah, so the league has done a lot of work getting it to a place where I think it's digestible. It's not ideal, but it's digestible.
I think it's going after the bad actors that
Yeah.
haven't played ball.
Well, and the concern on the city side is we tried to comply, but they got, where we submitted this, our information to, didn't like a certain aspect of it, and so they denied us. So then we're not compliant, but I think this allows for, a period to become compliant too.
Just for fun, like they always are just looking at the next thing built. Like they should be giving us credit for what we've already done, right? Like the city in general, not just the last 20% to be built here. Like
Yeah.
they should be looking at the whole thing.
It's interesting, Salt Lake City was pushing for the same thing, they feel kinda bit by that as well. Like they've done a lot already and still expected you to do more.
Yeah.
That was in our meeting yesterday, so.
That bill also talks about internal ADUs, which was passed last year where it talked about what we could and couldn't do. It adds a couple clarifications.
especially as it goes to garage ADUs, attached garage, but there's apartment above it. They wanted to clarify that that is a part of the home, that it's a IADU, it's not a detached ADU. And then the last piece is it sets standards for plat reviews, which essentially follows, I haven't gone into major detail on the bill language, but I think it follows our process already, where
Our
the
process is actually better than what they're asking for, so.
yeah. So it's,
we'll stick
I
with
think
what
that
we're
will be
doing.
okay.
I think from Harriman's viewpoint, it's not concerning what they're proposing, but there are a lot of cities out there that final plat review goes to, you know, the city council, for example, instead of a staff, they're proposing a staff as the final plat review, preliminary plat review can go to a planning commission, that sort of thing.
The last draft I saw on the IADU was saying that we would not be able to require a fifth parking stall for that unit, is that still?
Four is the maximum that you can require.
Which we typically have been saying that we have 2 in the garage and 2 in the driveway, that's our 4. Currently, we're requiring essentially a fifth. But that bill, if it's passed in
I
its
guess we have
current draft,
to
we
question,
would,
do we count the garage? If there's a staircase coming down to it, we can't actually park it.
yeah, right.
I think you see that in a
Anyway,
lot
so
of
that could
houses.
have an impact on us.
Yeah.
The other clarification was that the ADU language of the previous bill said that the living spaces need to be essentially touching. And that's why they were asking for this exception for separated by a garage or above a garage.
Well, in LPC, they kinda mentioned, back to the parking, and I don't know where it's updated, they said something about current ordinance plus 1.
Right,
up
and
to
now
4. But
they
just
let
that
us
they
do
put
that
the max
last
of
year,
4 though.
Yeah.
but now they're saying,
Max of 4.
So that it was your ordinance plus 1 last year, now they're gonna limit that to just 4.
So everyone complaining about parking situations, this is it.
yeah,
The last one
Storm the county.
I'll briefly mention is SB 199 came out today, it's a McHale bill. This would prohibit referendum on land use decisions if passed by 2/3 vote.
That's
So,
back this year.
I didn't hear any discussions on the league, so I don't know if,
It's not even on their tracker yet.
yeah, it's not on their tracker,
It
but
just
it's,
came out.
yeah, it just came out today. So it depends on, that can be a nice thing not to have that as a process, cause it's, you know, as a legislative body, you make a decision on behalf of the city, but then you get a group of upset residents that refer things. I think the developers like this and are pushing for it because then they don't have a referendum that delays their project for another, you know, year or so. So it's,
At least this bill would make it clear that they don't want referendums, rather instead of making a hurdle that's so high that it's impossible to get a referendum, but making it sound like it's still possible.
Or making the language so ambiguous that the group that wants to
Yeah,
do
at
it
least
gets
they're being-
into it and then figures
They're
out
being
that.
transparent. We don't want residents messing up our decisions, that's what they're saying.
there,
We're okay.
There's lots.
yeah, there are lots. The one that is not in bill form yet is talking about standard of road width. So we don't have any language, it's just negotiations that are happening right now. This would be an administrative process, so it's not taking away any legislative authority, however, there are concerns, they're pushing for 25-foot width,
It's just
right?
have bumper cars.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
essentially you
25
would
feet.
restrict parking on that street.
Fire code requires parking restricted to one side if you're less than 32 and more than 26, and if you're less than 26, you have to no park both sides.
So essentially it would be no parking on that street.
So the league is pushing back on that proposed potential language to minimum of, or the maximum a city could use is 32 feet. Asphalt, I don't think that includes curb.
I think that's curb to curb.
Is it curb to curb?
Curb face to
It's
curb
been
face.
described as both, but I think what they're talking about is asphalt. They'll push for the drivable areas, the gutter too.
Now, that way you actually could park on both sides and still
Yeah.
function.
So that one's concerning, but we'll wait on some language.
You won't have any speeding. Can't move.
Issue, we're just having that spears. It's hard to speed. Make a motion to.
Break.
Adjourn the city council work meeting and go into general.
Motion by Kenny,
Second.
second by Jared, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Steve. Are you gonna drop off now for the night?
I've still got about another 90 minutes or so.
Oh, wow. You wanna join the general?
It's
Do you wanna,
only 4 o'clock here, so.
Hey,